Welcome to your weekly astrology overview and zodiac forecast for week commencing the 24th of June. I'm going to share with you the event chart for the week, which we can all collectively relate to. But please stay with me. I will go through each of the 12 zodiac signs and explore them from Aries through to Pisces in terms of the ascendant, sun, or the moon. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're new to my channel, this is very much a community. If you have any thoughts, please feel very welcome to share them. If you're a returning visitor, your views and interactions are truly appreciated. As I have been sharing, about 50% of people who enjoy my videos are not subscribers. Please help to grow the channel by clicking that sub button and also bell notification symbol. Every time I drop a video, you should get an alert from YouTube. Also, I'm a consultant astrologer. If you'd like to have a one-to-one with me, please check out my testimonials, which are always updating. I share them as they come in and explore how other people have found working with me. If you want your written daily horoscope fired to your device each morning, please see the link below. I provide an overarching influence of the astrology, which helps us to see the big picture as well as relating to your zodiac forecast. Also, if you're a patron, I share a lot of extra information to my patrons. You can become a patron from $3 a month, but you can also get 20% off a live one-to-one reading with me or also Alyssa, my wife. Please see below for more. And if you would like to ascend above zodiac astrology and understand more about your natal perspective, if you share 3 pieces of personal data with me of time, date and place, or date and place, I can produce for you your life roadmap report, but also your 12 months transits. This overall package that has 30% off will give you searing insights and help you to understand how the influences are playing out in your situation, but crucially, how you can work with them more successfully. If you know your tropical astrology, please check out my draconic package, which is based on your soul or your karmic energies. Also see below for more. So on the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the week, which provides some very important pointers. Not least the moon is still just in Capricorn. If you recall, we had the first of 2 Capricorn full moons, the strawberry moon late last week, and that energy is still cascading into this week. The simple message there is work-life balance. If something is a little bit out of kilter or we're not feeling it from the energy that we have clustered in Cancer, which along with the Sun is Venus and Mercury, then that's where we need to be mindful of. How can we create situations where we feel more comfortable and at ease, even professionally? But the moon's very close to Pluto. Pluto, of course, about transformation. So there could be some intensity early this week. But in a more positive way, the moon links beautifully to Neptune, encouraging us to listen to our sixth sense. Sometimes we can ignore our hunches, and then later on we can say, do you know, I had that little feeling in the back of my head telling me, don't go for this. So whatever it is you're contemplating, do tune into that energy. But also, as we go into this new week, Jupiter in Gemini is forging a semi-sextile to Venus in the sign of Cancer. Semi-sextile 60 degrees, it's enabling. Jupiter's the planet of fortune, the greater benefit, and in traditional astrology, Venus is known as the lesser benefit, but it's still a very feel-good planet. So there's an opportunity here to talk about how we feel. So Jupiter's encouraging us in Gemini to find our voices. And you can see that there is a very close alliance too between Venus and Mars. And in fact, Venus and Mars are going to be in touch through this week in a sextile, and it becomes exact on Saturday. Now, of course, these two are the 2 players in the game of love, but it's not their only role. Venus can also be about money, and in the sign of Cancer, it can be to do with our homes, our decorative instincts. If we're thinking of making some changes or even spending time in our gardens, I feel Mars in Taurus gives us the push to perhaps be very appreciative of creature comforts, but also in a romantic context. If you are going to meet up with someone, a great way to enjoy it may be to invite them round, cook them a nice meal, or meet up somewhere to have dinner too. Now, this is a week when we also have a link between Mercury and Saturn. Now, Mercury is about how we think, how we articulate our ideas. It is a bit muted in the sign of Cancer, but that stable link to Saturn in also a water sign of Pisces suggests that if we choose our words with care, the chances are we can express them in a way that someone's going to think is meaningful and sincere. Also, as this week goes on, the Sun moves into a semi-sextile with Jupiter, again encouraging us to be optimistic about how we express our feelings. But as the week draws to a close, it's Mercury forging a link to Uranus, and so therefore there can be some exciting, perhaps slightly unexpected developments, maybe a late invitation, a text message which cheers us up. But as we get to Saturday, Saturn, the planet of structure in Pisces, slams on the brakes and goes into a retrograde which will go on to mid-November for 20 weeks. It's going to inverse just under 7 degrees. So it starts this process at 19 degrees and 25, goes back to 12 degrees and 41. But also we have on Saturday Lilith, Black Moon Lilith, makes its way into the sign of Libra, where it's going to be through to March next year. Now, in the sign of Virgo, Lilith has been somewhat muted, perhaps much more concerned with crisp bed linen than the raunchy stuff that can go on. Now, obviously, the sign of Libra is very much about balance and it's about relating. So what Lilith can teach us here is where a relationship is just never going to work for us, however much we try to be a people pleaser or to see other people's point of view. But it also can give us a bit of a push if we really desire someone to come into our life to be more proactive and not so passive. Now that's the big picture for this week. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs, from Aries through to Pisces, from the perspective of your ascendant, sun or the moon. Welcome Aries to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 24th of June for the ascendant, sun or the moon. On the screen now I'm showing your event chart right at the start of the week, which shows your ruler Mars forging a developing link with Venus. Now these two planets are obviously very important when it comes to romance. If there is somebody you're attracted to new, it could be some gentle walks in the countryside. With the collective of energy in Cancer, your environment can be a great way just to relax and perhaps enjoy a nice lunch out. If you're getting to know someone a little more, you may want to invite them round and cook them a meal. In fact, getting together with loved ones generally can be something you can appreciate. But with Pluto forging quite a tense angle to the Sun right at the start of this week, your long-term plan may need to be modified in some ways by the emotional dimension that's developing with the Sun, Venus and Mercury all in Cancer. And also because Saturn, which has been in your 12th house for about a year and a quarter, is going to slow down from the end of this week as it goes into the retrograde through to the middle of November. So the more feeling energy in Cancer and the reflective energy in Pisces, that water energy, is something you need to weave into your situation. And if you have been coming to terms with some big ending in your life, whether it's been professionally, whether it's been around an interest, a friendship, or even a relationship, there may be still some deep work to do, and that Saturn retrograde can help you through it. However, if you are wanting to manifest a new relationship in your situation, the fact that Venus and Mars peak in their alliance this week, just as Black Moon Lilith, which is very much to do with desire, moves into your sector of relating, can be very good if you do have a first date. But the other thing I wanted to tell you about Aries, if there has been something you've been working on creatively, whether it's a home-based hobby or something to do with your profession, this can be a week when you can bring it to life. It could be initially by recognizing the idea or the talents you have can just be moulded into something more tangible. That's Mars in your second house. But also, as Mercury sparks with Uranus, don't hold back if you start thinking about things in a slightly different and more novel way. Actually, that might work for you just as well as following a well-trodden path. But if you have been thinking about converting a home-based hobby or interest into a small business or enterprise, or working from home, this could turn out to be actually a very fortunate week. And with the Sun and Jupiter in the semi-sextile developing more strongly as the week goes on, don't hold back from expressing how you really feel about key elements in your situation. I hope you have a great week, and if you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please help it grow and do so now. Welcome Taurus to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 24th of June for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now I'm showing your event chart at the start of the week, which gives us some very important pointers. Now there's a couple of things that we need to look at first of all. Your ruler Venus is in a very chatty part of your scope, and of course last week the full moon was in the opposite sign to Cancer of Capricorn, and that's where the moon begins this week. So there may be still something that you've been thinking about or talking about that's still very much to the fore, but it can be creating some excitement, to be honest, because Venus is forging a great link to Mars. Now that's going to go on all through this week, and it's going to peak towards the end of the week. So for you, that third house energy is linking with Mars in your own sign, and Mars is giving you a real sense of excitement, thrust, but also an encouragement to manifest what you want as an individual. And sometimes with Mars in the first house, we can have just that little bit more extra self-belief and confidence. So if there is someone you want to reach out to, whether it's professional or personally, that link between those two is really helpful for sure. But of course, Pluto right at the top of the chart on your 10th house cusp, very much to do with how you interact with the world at large, suggesting that work or your professional situation or your interface with people in general is changing. But because it is in an awkward angle to the Sun right at the start of this week, it is still very important to think carefully in terms of your choice of words. But when it comes to communications, Mercury, the planet which is very much to do with talk and thought, is actually forging some very constructive links this week. First of all to Saturn in your sector of your long-term plan, but also to Uranus in your sign later in the week. So something really unexpected can start to unfold this week, which really gives you a sense of excitement. However, I have to be honest, Saturn is going to be slamming on the brakes as this week draws to a close. It has been perhaps asking some questions about what you want from your long-term future over the last year and a quarter. And to be honest, there may be some people who've made way, particularly associations, perhaps some friendships that are a little bit weaker, and there could be more of that coming from now through to the middle of November. But as ever, what Saturn teaches us is very valuable, and the more we can be open to it and to receive that energy, the more we can gain from it. But also, Black Moon Lilith moves out of the part of your situation which is to do with romance. But Virgo, the host, can be a bit cool, and it moves into the sign of balance. If you are single, the chances are between now and the middle of March next year, you could encounter someone in quite an ordinary situation. So be open-minded. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a bar or perhaps on a dating app. It could be somewhere completely mundane that the spark of attraction starts to develop. But if you are in an existing sign, I think what Black Moon Lilith moving into Libra here is saying is that you want to feel appreciated and respected, but particularly when it comes to where you help your partner or you work together on the domestic load, there needs to be a good balance between what you put in and what they put in. And if you feel you are in a relationship where there is a little bit of an inequality, that's going to be the thing that you're going to be mindful of. But when it comes to that long-term plan and Saturn slowing down, just be aware that you may have to go over some old ground, but it's all taking you towards a point where your future just becomes that much clearer and you're really certain of what you want to achieve. It's been a great pleasure being with you, Taurus. Have a super week, and if you've yet to subscribe, please do so now. Welcome, Gemini, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 24th of June for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm showing your event chart at the start of the week. We need to be mindful of your ruler Mercury in Cancer, but also the presence of Jupiter, the planet of fortune, in your sign. Now, modern astrologers spend a lot of time dispelling the myth that astrology is all linked to luck or bad luck. What it's really linked to is cycles. But of course, it's what we do with the information I share to you that makes the cycles come to life in a potentially beneficial way. So this week begins with Jupiter in your sign, which is encouraging you to be very dynamic and have the maximum amount of self-belief. Links brilliantly with Venus, the planet of money, but also goes on to link brilliantly to the Sun as well. And guess what? They're both in house 2, which can be about loot. So if you take the initiative this week, it could turn out to work out really well for you. And also something that's been bubbling around in the back of your mind for some while could start to spark into life in a much more tangible way, as Uranus and Mercury, also in your second house, your ruler Mercury, the second house of everyday resources, link brilliantly as this week goes on. But last week's full moon was, of course, in your sector of shared resources, where you're most invested with someone else. If there has been some tense conversations, or you see something very differently from someone else, as we start this week, the moon passes over Pluto, the planet which is very much to do with transformation. But in house 9, that could mean that you're going to have a really important discussion. It could be that you're going to apply for a job, you're going to have a conversation with someone that can be very supportive to you, or in a personal relationship, perhaps you're both really just going to say it how it is. It may not necessarily be easy if you see the use of money, for example, differently or have different values, but you will have that opportunity to clarify things. Now, this is a week when Venus also links to Mars, and that reaches a peak as the week draws to a close. Now, of course, these two players can be very much about romance, but Mars is in your 12th house. Is there someone from your past that keeps coming up evocatively into your mind? I'm not encouraging you to reach out to an old flame. You need to think very carefully if the pattern would be any different this time around. But it's also possible that Mars in the 12th house is linked to an old colleague, an old contact, and that person could be really lucky for you, because Mars in your 12th house can be about desire, and again, Venus in the second house, money. But equally, if you are getting to know someone romantically, it could be a little bit of a slow burn. Or are you beginning to realise that someone, when they're around you, it's not so much about what they're saying to you, it's more to do with their body language. So some kind of slow burning attraction can start to build up in quite an exciting way this week. But also, as the week draws to a close, Saturn, the planet very much to do with the rulership of time, karma, cycles, life cycles, coming through to the end of its entire journey of 29.5 years in the sign of culmination, Pisces. For you, that's your sector of physical culmination, so the way you link to the wider world, and therefore can be about success. But of course, Saturn can be about limitations and snags. And if your professional situation has been challenging over the last year and a quarter, or you've had a lot of extra responsibilities, it wouldn't be a complete surprise. But this week, Mercury moves forwards and forges a very articulate link to Saturn. So if you wanted to showcase your skills in a very practical but very tangible way, someone could be really impressed. But then Saturn goes into a retrograde, which it does each year for 20 weeks through to the middle of November. And if you don't feel that you're quite still in the role that's good for you, this is going to be a period when you will, I feel, start to really grapple with it, because next year Saturn will move into the sign of Aries, which is very much about your future. It's going to be a brief sojourn. It will go back into your sector of success. But if you're not in the sweet spot, keep the faith. You need to keep being consistent. And that's where Jupiter in your sign is really interesting, because Jupiter is technically debilitated in Gemini, but of course it only comes around once every 12 years, and it can bring success. The key is not to overpromise, and Saturn's very good for helping that. It can help you to stay grounded and real. So if you believe in yourself, you're persistent and consistent, very Saturnian approaches, but you have that idea or that faith comes through Jupiter, there's a lot to go for. Also, as the week draws to a close, Black Moon Lilith, which has quite the reputation for seeing or prompting us to go for those forbidden fruits, moves into your sector of romance for the following months through to the middle of March. So that can be really exciting, because it has been in a sleepy sector for some while. So it's going to see you much more aware of how you can connect with people and bring some extra excitement and increase to your pulse. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Gemini. Have a great week, and if you've yet to subscribe, please help the channel to grow and do so now. Welcome, Cancer, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 24th of June for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the week, and you can see the moon is just still in house 7, where the full moon manifested towards the end of last week. So relationship matters have probably been something you've been thinking about, but also perhaps you've been firming up and standing up for some things you need to do for yourself. But if there is still something that's outstanding, as the moon connects with Pluto later on Monday, that can be a very important moment, because perhaps you're really not going to budge on something that you want to do, and someone else close to you may need to accept how single-minded you feel. And sometimes in life, we do need to do what's really right for us. But because you have Venus and Mercury in your sign, they give you the communicational skills, that extra bit of grace along with the Sun to express how you feel to others. And in fact, as we start this week, Venus is forging a terrific link with Jupiter. Jupiter's in the part of your situation where he promotes your interest in philosophy, healing, spirituality. And if you are someone who's very active in these areas, the fact that as this week goes on, Venus also links to Mars in your sector of friendships and your life direction, there could be some new alliances forging at the moment that really are giving you a lot of hope. Also, Mercury, as it progresses through this week, locks into Saturn. Now, Saturn, to be honest, over the last year and a quarter, may have brought some harsh realities to bear at times. It could do so more over the next 5 months as it goes retrograde from the end of this week. But its link with Mercury suggests that where you're being very realistic, but at the same time still thinking about how you can grow your situation, there could be something you plan now, perhaps to do with a course, higher education, learning a new skill that can work out spectacularly well. Also, because as this week goes on, Venus and Mars, the planets of relating and romance, come into a really good connection on Saturday. If you do go on a date or you get together with a group of friends, it could turn out to be really enjoyable. But as the week draws to a close, as I mentioned, Saturn does go retrograde. But I want you to think about the things you've learned from Saturn's journey through Pisces over this last 15 months or so. And it could be that some of your philosophies or beliefs have shifted, or you've taken a different approach to some things that in the past you used to perhaps be more invested in. Perhaps Jupiter in your 12th house is going to open up your thinking in some unexpected ways over the next year before he enters your sign. But also as the week ends, so does Black Moon Lilith move into the sign of Libra. Now, Libra for you is your sector of home, family, emotion. So even if you are attracted to someone in quite an intense way through till the middle of March next year, I think you still need to feel that there is that nurturing element to their nature. So as much as someone may have that dashing charisma, allure, and even sexiness, you still need to feel that it can be someone that you can relate to in terms of your home situation. It's been a great pleasure being with you, Cancer. Have a super week, and if you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please do so now. Welcome, Leo, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 24th of June for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm showing your event chart right at the start of the week, and we need to be mindful of your ruler, the Sun. And the Sun is locked away in house 12 along with Venus and Mercury. And that full moon, which occurred at the end of last week, is still very active in terms of this week. And I think it's possible around a relationship, and not necessarily a personal one in terms of a romance, but could be to do with a colleague, a boss, a friend or an associate. Something could come out into the open that turns out to be a little bit of a surprise. Maybe you're about to fess up about how you feel about something that hasn't felt quite right for you. And because Mars, the planet of passion, and a planet which governs the third decan of your sign, is very dominant in your chart, it's possible that a sensitive issue that other people may back off from, you could have the confidence to actually go for it this week. And maybe you're going to actually meet someone professionally and build up a connection, but in a low-key, even confidential way. So, for example, if you're in a job at the moment which you're not enjoying, but you do want to explore your options, you could meet someone or connect to someone very influential. But also, Venus and Mercury in your 12th house do forge very good connections to other planets this week. And sometimes it's not necessarily what we do in an obvious way that's important in life or astrology. And you may find yourself by the end of this week taking those soundings, sending out a proposal, meeting someone in that private way and just exploring things, and in a way which gives you a little bit of maneuverability, which is no bad thing. But if there is contention in a relationship, if you haven't really been getting on, whether it is with a company you work within or colleagues or that line manager or a personal partner, I think Pluto is pushing you to really take it seriously, particularly early on Monday when the moon moves to connect with Pluto. And you may feel much more strongly about pushing back if you feel that someone is being unreasonable. You can also do some very good work this week in terms of your long-term resources. Saturn may have been making things a little more difficult in terms of your business situation or using the resources you've got as effectively as you would like over the last 15 months. And Saturn will go retrograde at the end of this month. So it's an area you still need to keep chipping away at and be persistent, which is what Saturn asks us to do. But Mercury actually forges a great link with Saturn and also with Uranus, which is in a very prominent situation. So if you've been generating an idea behind the scenes that you feel has got legs, by the end of this week I feel you may reveal it. And then critically, Black Moon Lilith moves into a speedier part of your situation for interacting with others. And through to next March, a text message or email or connection through someone in your immediate community or a friend or an introduction could see you drawn towards somebody new, and especially if you are single. It's been great being with you, Leo. Have a lovely week, and if you've yet to subscribe, please do so now. Welcome, Virgo, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 24th of June for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. I feel last week's full moon, which continues to pour its energy into this week, for you was very much about asking you, are you really showcasing your talent around what you're involved with in terms of your future? Whether it's about your work, about your interests, about the people you're networking with, can you really feel that you're manifesting the best of yourself? If the answer to those questions is yes, this can be a very productive week for you, because the energy in the sign of Cancer is linking in a very stable way through Mercury, your ruler, to Saturn, and then to Uranus later in the week. So it could be that some ongoing ties can get more solid, or some new people or situations come in which create some excitement and help you to feel that you're right at the heart of things, which has come from that full moon. But also Mars has been pushing you to be a bit more devil may care, and its link to Venus this week, particularly if you're single, means that if you do get an invitation or a chance to meet up with somebody, I would be open-minded about it. But you know, those connections could come through your work just as much as your social world, and Jupiter, the planet of fortune, is right at the top of your chart still, suggesting the next year could see a big shift occur for you in a very positive way. And it's going to be the connections that you build that are important to this process. But of course, Saturn has been in your sector of relating since March 2023. And there may have been some people who have made way in your situation. And in fact, by the end of this week, as Saturn goes into its annual retrograde through to the middle of November, I think you will be scrutinising your links to others carefully and setting good boundaries. But there's a lot about this particular week which makes me feel that you should be very optimistic about what you can achieve, whether it is with people you know well and trust and feel comfortable with, or new, fresh people coming in, or one particular person that you could be drawn to in a more romantic context, because the link between Venus and Mars, the two planets very much to do with romance, reaches a peak as this week draws to a close. And Saturn going retrograde could, in a way, bring someone in very important to you during its retrograde period, because Saturn isn't all about bad news, but that is the perception that seems to be out there for it. Saturn rewards us where we work hard, and if you've been working very hard in understanding what you have to offer, being clear about what you want, but also setting your boundaries, but working hard at understanding what other people need from you, these next few months could see some very valuable developments around all sorts of connections with others. It's been a pleasure being with you. Have a great week. And if you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please do so now. Welcome, Libra, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 24th of June for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart at the start of the week. And the big takeout is that cluster of 3 players in the sign of Cancer, because the 10th house is where people see us. It's where we raise our profile. It's where we create more visibility. It's also where we perhaps connect to people who are influential. Now, if you're having some big meetings this week, going for a job, having an interview, doing a presentation, this week could see you make considerable progress. But the key is overcoming in some ways the position of the moon right at the start of this week, because the full moon that occurred last week was perhaps emphasizing some of what you may perceive as your limitations, your frailties, your vulnerabilities, just at a time when the heavens are conspiring to push you forwards into the limelight. But if you are really clear about what you want to achieve around any life plan, whether it's around property, a job application, local activities where you're involved in some kind of voluntary role, if you're clear about those, the links that these three make, Venus, your ruler, Mercury, and the Sun, can all be really encouraging for you. If you're not so clear, it could be because you're wanting to follow a path which is much more individualistic. And as the moon moves forwards on Monday and connects to Pluto and then forges a tense angle to the Sun, if you're feeling that how you want to be is not how other people expect you to be, that could be a sticking point. However, once this week comes to a close, Libra, you are blessed with a very lovely development because Black Moon Lilith moves into your sign. It's been in a very muted location for some while. Through to next March in your sign, it's going to give you a little bit more devilment. And perhaps that's what really you need to take into this week. Even if you aren't quite sure of a particular part of your situation or how people might react to you, keep believing in just how gorgeous you are, how alluring you are, how much talent you've got. Really set your intentions around these areas and then work very hard with the help of Mars applying to Venus, your ruler, but also Mercury applying to Saturn and then to Uranus. If you can really focus on those details, someone could become much more conscious of the skills and abilities that you have. Now, Saturn does go into a retrograde as this week draws to a close. We all have only a certain amount of energy and vitality, and the suggestion with Saturn through to the middle of November is that you will need to be very focused on what's really essential. So that's one of the things about this week. When it comes to using your personality power, your charisma, even your charm, that is all very well fared for you. But you do need to back it up with an attention to what's really crucial. So don't scatter yourself too thinly. Don't underestimate what you've got to offer. If you feel that what you've got to offer is not quite what other people want, don't let it demotivate you in any way, because if you keep that sense of belief that eventually you are going to draw to you exactly the right opportunities, I feel you can manifest those in a very powerful way this week. And it could also see you by the end of the week as Mars and Venus reach an absolute peak of their productive sextile, could see you have a financial breakthrough. And with Black Moon Lilith arriving in your sign, expect a lot more attention through to next March next year. It's been a pleasure being with you. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please do so now. Welcome, Scorpio, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 24th of June for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm showing your event chart right at the start of the week, and it does provide some exciting clues, not least involving your traditional ruler of Mars. Mars is going to be forging a fantastic alliance with Venus right through this week, which will peak on Saturday. So let's think about where Mars is located. It's in your sector of relating, but it's also in the part of your chart to do with where you may need to be competitive. And because you've got the cluster of energy in the sign of Cancer, your sister water sign, pushing you to be more adventurous, perhaps it is going to be around a sporting activity or an interest that you can join up with someone else and spur each other on. But of course, on that full moon last week, there was a sense that you needed to talk about something, and Pluto, your modern ruler, was feeding into that event in not a particularly helpful way. And there's still some of that energy at the start of this week. So if you're feeling a bit tender about a more sensitive strand, the best thing you can do is not be defensive, because Mars in the 7th can be a bit prickly. If someone does want to talk about something that you're a little less keen or inclined to do, just try to go with it, because those energies in Cancer are excellent for actually hearing different philosophies and viewpoints. And because Mercury, for example, forges a very solid link with Saturn, then an exciting link to Uranus, changing things up in all sorts of parts of your situation and approaching things with a spirit of change and spontaneity is actually going to be really great for you. It's just right at the start of this week, the moon moves from Capricorn and lands right on the top of your modern ruler, Pluto, and that could bring up some sense of a little bit of vulnerability, or if you are feeling a little bit withdrawn, you may not want to engage with all these exciting energies. But I feel as the week goes on, you will be getting into it. Also, Saturn does go into a retrograde as the week draws to a close. That's going to last for 20 weeks, but don't see this as being something that's all bad. Saturn is about structures. The fifth house, where he's slowing down, is all about where you can express your talents. And really, for the last 15 months, you may have felt it's been more difficult to be heard around what you've got to offer. So it just means you need to dig down a little deeper. There may be some things or some situations that you've been drawn to that aren't quite right for you, and you do need to let go of them. So see Saturn as being something you can work with rather than being something that's hostile to you. But as the week ends, also Black Moon Lilith does move into a very private part of your situation. If you are someone who would like to meet someone, I think one of the things that you're going to be yearning for in a way is a person who can tune into you in a deeply psychological but even unspoken way. But if you are feeling more outgoing, if you're in a better space, this week can actually be very interactive. And if you're traveling anywhere or going to any kind of event like watching a band or a play or meeting up with friends, I think you're going to have a much livelier time than you might think was possible as the moon collides with Pluto early on Monday, which could see you feeling quite tender, a little bit exposed, but stick with it. There's much more to gain from this week than to be feared. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please do so now. Welcome Sagittarius to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 24th of June for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now I'm showing your event chart, and your ruling planet Jupiter is really going to be influential this week. It starts the week in a great alliance with Venus. In traditional astrology, these are known as the lesser and greater benefics. But it could be that your connection to someone could see some very good advice heading your way. It might be on a long-term financial situation, such as a property, a rental, maybe it's to do with a mortgage or a savings plan, but the advice that you get could steer you in a very productive way. Now, last week's full moon was asking you to get the ins and outgoings in your situation more tightly nailed down. But because Mercury, the planet of trade and relating, links in such a solid way to Saturn, I think you're actually going to be quite cautious, despite the fact that Jupiter does link so well to both Venus and then the Sun in that part of your situation to do with shared resources. But it could be you that's giving someone some great advice. But also Mars in your sixth house, which is giving you much greater dynamism and potentially much greater stamina, that's forging a very positive link to Venus as well, which peaks by the end of the week. Sometimes it is about really just analysing our resources in a very sliced up way and seeing where we can tweak things and squeeze a bit more from the overall mix. And I think that combination could really give you a desire to do that. But of course the eighth house can also be very much to do with who we want to be close to. So having Jupiter in your sector of relating, linking so well to the Sun and Venus, is good if you're wanting to get closer to someone. But right at the start of the week, the moon moves out of Capricorn and applies to Pluto in your third house. And you may have an exchange. It could be by text message or email, and the information you get early in the week might seem a little bit disappointing. But stay open-minded, because Mercury then goes on to forge an excellent link to Uranus. And even if something does feel a bit stuck, you could, by the end of the week, find a fresh approach which unlocks a solution. But Saturn does go into a retrograde for 20 weeks from Saturday through to the middle of November. Saturn has been providing some resistance around where you live, family and emotional matters for the last 15 months. And it may have not been a particularly easy phase in some ways, but what Saturn's been teaching you is to urge you to take your feelings and your needs seriously. And I think the retrograde is just going to be more of that, but perhaps more intensely. And that actually can be something you can gain a lot from. Also, as the week draws to a close, Venus and Mars forge a really perfect alliance, which could be good if you are getting closer to someone or you're in a relationship where you're very committed. And if you're very aligned about the family, for example, that Saturn retrograde won't change the fact that you could be very close and on good terms. But also Black Moon Lilith moves into Libra as the week ends, where it will be through to next March. And if you are single, don't underestimate how your links to other people, whether it's through shared interest, a group of people, a sports team, that could be a clue of how you can connect to someone through to the middle of March 2025. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Sagittarius. Have a great week, and if you've yet to subscribe, please do so now. Welcome, Capricorn, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 24th of June for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm showing your event chart right at the start of the week. And the big news for you is that your ruler, Saturn, is going to be slamming on the brakes as this week draws to a close for 5 months through to the middle of November. But remember, Saturn is in your 3rd house, so that's very much to do with how we think, how we interact with people on a daily basis, can be to do with our belief systems, can be to do with quick movements, but also what we write, our ideas. Saturn, of course, can be limiting, but it also can bring a lot of discipline, which you often have in spades. And this week, Saturn is going to be forging a very constructive link to Mercury, the planet of communication in your sector of relationships. So if you do need to forge an agreement, have a meeting, listen to what somebody has to say, you can be attentive, you can be steady, and they are going to, I feel, forge a very good impression of you. But of course, the full moon in your sign last week, the first of 2, this one, the strawberry moon, was flagging up to you where you might not be so happy about certain relationships. But the collective of energy, including Venus in your opposite sign, suggests that even if there is something you feel that you would like to change, your listening skills and diplomacy will be very important to make progress. Also, Mars is giving you a lot of extra dynamism at the present time and a lot of extra sex appeal, if I could be so honest. And Mars forges a brilliant link with Venus, which peaks on Saturday. So if there is someone you're drawn to and you're chatting up, this is a very good portent. But at the start of the week, as the moon moves out of your sign, it does connect to Pluto. If there's a financial issue, which you see in very different ways to someone you're connecting with, whether it's a colleague, whether it's a financial loan you're trying to get, if there's a slight disagreement there, you do need to try and stay a little cool to unlock the solution. Actually, the 2 planets of fortune are well aligned at the start of the week, Jupiter and Venus. That's good for you too. And also, as Mercury connects to Uranus, very different energies to your ruler Saturn, later in the week, it may be that you're going to see something in a very fresh way or come up with a brainwave, which actually can be terrific. And I feel that generally people are going to be receptive to you this week. You may just have to be a little bit patient if they don't immediately come back to you in quite the way you want. But as the week draws to a close, Black Moon Lilith does move into a powerful part of your situation. Libra is very much the host through to next March, about balance, of course, but it's also about relating. And I think who holds the power in an existing relationship is going to be an interesting theme. But if you are looking for a tie, don't be surprised if it does come through your work or a worldly interaction. But with Saturn going retrograde as the week draws to a close, if you are thinking about a new mode of transport or perhaps some new technology or training to learn new skills, remember it's your usual cautious, patient, applied approach gives you a lot of information to make the best of decisions. Don't see Saturn retrograde as an automatically bad thing. So this week, generally, if you're open to it, can see lots of opportunities to connect to different types of people in a very productive way. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great week. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please do so now. Welcome Aquarius to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 24th of June for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now is your event chart right at the start of the week. You still have that cluster of energy, which for you is very practical. The 6th house can be about revisions, little changes we make, particularly with Mercury there, that can be beneficial for our overall life structure, the organisation and efficiency of things, little tweaks around diet, fitness, but also it can be around jobs. But because Saturn, your traditional ruler, is going to be linking up in a very productive way this week with Mercury, and Mercury in the 6th house has a very Virgoan feel, it's possible for you to drill into the detail in a very effective way. So if you wanted to just make the most of your resources or explain an idea, the chances are you can do it very well. But also as the week begins, we're coming out of that full moon energy, which was very sensitive in the 12th house, could have aroused some anxieties or concerns. But the moon then meets Pluto in your sign early on Monday. And that's going to give you a sense of conviction. Whatever you're dealing with, you're going to deal with it on your terms with that combination. It's going to make you much more feisty in a way, but it does apply in a bit of an awkward way with the Sun in your 6th house. And if there is a situation where you're being asked to bend into other people's needs and be sacrificing, and it feels like your own personal situation isn't really being considered, that could actually frustrate you a little bit. But Jupiter sparkling away in your 5th house just says to you, fall back on your personality power, because Jupiter forges a great link to both Venus and also the Sun as the week goes on, and your imagination and flair could actually be something that other people start to become much more aware of. In fact, with Uranus linking to Mercury as the week goes on, your fresh approach, perhaps sometimes your more inventive and innovative ideas are not always adopted because people don't quite get where you're coming from at that precise moment. But someone could be more receptive. And Venus and Mars in your 4th house, is giving you a lot of determination to stand up for what you need emotionally. They come up to a peak by the end of the week, which can be helpful too. In a romantic context, if you do live with someone, one of the best ways to ensure harmony this week is to get a fairer share of the domestic load. So if you're doing too much, put your foot down a little bit and get them to do more. Even if you have kids, everybody pitches in a little more. It's going to make you feel much more fulfilled. However, as the week draws to a close, Saturn, your traditional ruler, does go into a retrograde. Now, over the last 15 months, you may have had to really batten down the hatches a little bit when it comes to everyday costs. And maybe it's also felt you've had to work on becoming much more conscious of your personal value. There can be more of this over the next 20 weeks through the retrograde, but actually think about what you've learned since last March 23, and I feel that you can use that to guide you through this next phase of Saturn's journey through this area. Don't underestimate your hidden resources or your experience or your resilience. These are great qualities that you may not be celebrating in the way you could. Now, when it comes to your love life, It is true that Black Moon Lilith has been in your 8th house, which can be quite hot. Black Moon Lilith is very much about what we yearn for, the forbidden fruit, the 8th house, but because it was hosted by Virgo, there's a kind of incompatibility between the 8th house lure of intimacy and Virgo's need for everything to be very sanitized, clean, and a little bit detached. But Black Moon Lilith moves into your sister sign of Libra, and it could be through going to evening classes, on an educational course, travel, a holiday. You may encounter someone between now and next March who really could be of great interest and fascination to you. Have a great week, Aquarius. Thank you so much for joining me. And if you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please do so now. Welcome, Pisces, to your in-depth weekly forecast for week commencing the 24th of June for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now, I'm showing your event chart right at the start of the week, and we need to be mindful of your two rulers, Neptune and Jupiter. If you recall, as last week came to a close, there was a full moon. And that full moon for you was in your sector of friendship, but also your longer term plan. Anything to do with group activities and interactions with others was actually really quite blessed by that event because of the cluster of energies in your sister water sign of Cancer, and that continues to be very vibrant this week. The issue was that if you're born towards the end of Pisces, Neptune is merging into your Sun, or perhaps your Ascendant or Moon, and that can create some issues. It can feel that certain parts of our world are almost being eroded away, or we can feel a little bit confused. And particularly around a romantic situation, or perhaps to do with your future, that may have been where you've been uncertain. But ironically, as we come into this week, the moon's moved forwards and is forging an almost perfect link with Neptune. And then it's going to connect with Pluto. You could have quite an important heart-to-heart with someone later on Monday, and that can create some clarity if you weren't sure about something, and that can provide some reassurance. But also it's possible that you may see something much more deeply. But if you do, I want you to understand that the cluster of energy in Cancer is still so incredibly vibrant for you right through this week, because Jupiter, your traditional ruler, forges a great link with Venus. So those are the two planets of fortune, Venus in Cancer. And if you have been wanting to entertain at home or start a home-based business, or perhaps there's someone that's been introduced to you through someone you're very close to, like a family member, that can provide some hope. But also it may be about a property matter too. Now, as the week goes on, it's the Sun that links with Jupiter, and that gives even more uplift. But Venus and Mars, the two cohorts of romance, are also inching closer into a wonderful collaboration which reaches a peak as this week draws to a close. And Mars is in the part of your chart to do with how you articulate your ideas, and you can do so with passion and conviction at the present time. And just do bear in mind that Venus and Mars is a very dynamic link. So if you are connecting to people socially as the week goes on, I think it could be much more fun than you may imagine. But it's also true that Mercury in Cancer links very well to Saturn. That's a very solid link. If you do need to express an idea or pursue something that's important to you as an individual, a mixture of flair, the planets in Cancer, but particularly Mercury, arcs back very well to you seeming solid, reliable and realistic, which is what's going to come from Saturn. Now, ironically, Saturn is going to be slowing down in your sign from the end of this week, and the inverse is nearly 5 degrees over the next 20 weeks through to the middle of November. Now, it just depends where you've got personal planets. If you have got any, from 19 degrees where he is at the present time, right back to about maybe 10 degrees, I think you are going to feel the coolness of Saturn, but what that will also do is help you to sharpen up thinking about what's really relevant and what you should be really focusing on, because this week actually can be great fun. Could see some frivolous stuff, some jolly social interaction, but there is that more serious vibe developing by the end of the week. But I want to reassure you that what Saturn's essentially asking you to do is strip down your life to the things that are really important and don't get too caught up by different distractions. And that's part of what the code was on that full moon. It gave you a lot of choices and perhaps of who to be with, maybe one special person, maybe an interest or a group of people, but essentially Saturn is asking you to keep it simple and really prioritize, and that's the plan for the next 5 months too. Thank you so much for joining me, Pisces. Have a great week. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please do so now.